Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing one of the most important topics, not only for medical affairs, but for anyone working in the pharmaceutical industry, which is compliance. We will start by defining compliance and the role we play as medical affairs, and then we will share the three most common mistakes a medical colleague might make in the context of compliance. And of course, we will share how to avoid such mistakes in your daily practice. Compliance is one of the foundational pillars of the pharmaceutical industry that ensures our practice is ethical and our products are safe, effective, and of course of high quality. And as expected, in medical affairs, we play a key role in maintaining the compliance standards because we serve as the bridge between our organizations and the healthcare community. And by the way, before going ahead, let me clarify one point regarding the name compliance. It depends on which company, which region you are working in. Sometimes we call it regulatory compliance, and in other times it is just compliance. By definition, compliance or regulatory compliance refer to a set of principles, protocols, or standard operating procedures established either by the regulatory agencies, governing bodies, or by the pharmaceutical industry itself. The objectives of these rules or policies are just two. One, to provide a direction on how specific activities should be conducted within the industry. So we maintain an ethical approach in everything we do. The second objective of these sets of rules is to ensure that our services, products, practices meet the expected standards of safety, quality, and ethics. So being compliant means that you follow the established regulatory and your organization's own guidelines, laws, and standards. On the other hand, if anyone or any organization is said to be non-compliant, this is a very serious issue in the pharmaceutical industry. To be frank with you, I tend to strongly claim that the most common reason for someone in the industry to lose a job is being non-compliant. This is because we are operating in the high-stakes environment of healthcare. So it is critical that we maintain 100% compliance at any given time during our career in the pharmaceutical industry, because being compliant ensures that our organizations operate within the legal and ethical boundaries, and also it ensures that you and your company avoid negative consequences, and these are many, including penalties, fines, legal actions, or reputational damage. For us as medical affairs, and as we are having the medical background and working in the pharmaceutical industry, this means we need to adhere to numerous guidelines to ensure both personal and organizational compliance. This is a core responsibility in medical affairs. And in general, we follow three sets of policies or guidelines. One, the international guidelines like the FDA or those of the EMEA. Two, the local regulations based on which country you are working in and where your company operates. Three, the industry codes such as your company's own ethical and compliance standards. As mentioned before, medical affairs plays a crucial role to ensure compliance and ethical standards. To ensure that these ethical standards or guidelines are followed across all company activities, especially when collaborating with commercial or marketing colleagues. Our primary responsibility here is to safeguard the scientific integrity of everything, of all materials, all activities, all communication, and promotional content, to ensure that information shared with the external world, including healthcare professionals and probably public, is accurate, balanced, and fully aligned with approved product labeling. In other words, we serve as the internal checkpoint that bridges science with business. Because we can provide this critical oversight to prevent non-compliance, like off-label discussions, misleading claims, or any activity that may breach the industry codes of practice. And when working with commercial and marketing teams, we ensure that promotional strategies are supported by robust clinical evidence. We ensure that these strategies meet the global and local regulatory standards and respect patient safety principles. This partnership between medical affairs and commercial teams will not only maintain compliance, but also it will build trust among different stakeholders, demonstrating that the scientific credibility and ethical transparency remain in the center of every decision we make. Additionally, and this is another important point we need to pay attention to, medical affairs is a well-trusted partner for compliance and legal colleagues. Because by our nature and our background, we tend to understand the healthcare ethics in general, and we are the only function probably in the industry that can make the balance between commercial strategies and ethical practice in healthcare. This doesn't mean that we work as compliance officers or always say no to everything. In fact, using compliance as a tool to inhibit commercial activities is a sign of weakness in medical affairs. What we need to do is to understand the needs of the marketing and commercial teams and advise the right way and policies to follow. Now let's shift gears and discuss the three most common reasons a medical affairs colleague would lose the trust and maybe the job because of being non-compliant. And before going ahead, let me share with you that through my career, I have seen few medical colleagues who may have been really very smart and clever, but unfortunately, they lost their roles because of compliance matters. And these compliance matters are always one or more of the following three topics: off-label use and discussions. 2, leakage of patient information, or in other words, breaching patient confidentiality. 3, compassionate use programs. So let's discuss these three non-compliant practices one by one. Let's start with off-label, and by definition, the off-label use refers to the prescription, description, or recommendation of a pharmaceutical product for an indication or a dosage or a patient population that is not approved by the relevant regulatory authority, whether it's the FDA, EMEA, or the local equivalent authority. Examples: a drug approved for mild to moderate hypertension being discussed for migraine management. Without approval, this is an off-label discussion. Or a medication approved for adults being discussed for the same indication but in pediatric use without local approval. Again, this is an off-label discussion. The key point is that off-label use is strictly prohibited by both local authorities and also by the industry ethical standards. While the definition seems clear and easy, real-life situations when it comes to off-label discussions can fall into gray areas. Therefore, and in my humble opinion, determination whether this is an off-label indication or not must be made by individuals with a medical background, like a physician or pharmacist or healthcare professionals. Medical affairs teams are the final authority within an organization for assessing whether a claim is on or off-label. With all the respect to legal and compliance colleagues, they are not subject matter experts to decide on this at all, and so they always need to refer to the medical teams. Let me share with you a real-life situation to show you the challenge that we can face when deciding if the claim is or is not an off-label one. The scenario is that we have a drug that is approved for mild or moderate depression. The MSL received the promotional material to review and approve with the promotional claim suggesting that its use for postpartum depression. And the MSL approved it, assuming that It is not an off-label indication because postpartum depression still falls under depression. This is completely wrong and was picked up by the auditors later on and was classified as off-label promotion. This is simply because postpartum depression, yes, it's a type of depression. However, it's considered a distinct condition and a different indication by the regulatory authorities. And certain medications are particularly approved for postpartum depression. So product X, or the product that was questioned, didn't have the data, didn't have the approval. And so this was an off-label promotional claim that was approved, unfortunately, by the medical colleague. We can spot 4 important learning points from this example. 1, even within the same disease area or the same symptoms, subtypes require different regulatory approvals in many cases. 2, clinical evidence alone is not enough. Regulatory approval is mandatory. So even if you have the data that the product has good safety and efficacy profiles in postpartum depression, this is not enough. You need to have this approved by the label or by the regulatory authorities before any proactive discussions about it. In complicated cases, only colleagues with medical background must make this decision, and continuous training and internal audits are definitely essential to prevent such errors. And with experience, medical colleagues learn and enhance their scope of judgment. And if we want also to discuss the leakage of information or breaching patient confidentiality, again, this is one of the most serious issues in the pharmaceutical industry anyone can face. In our work, we often interact with scientific data, safety reports, real-world evidence, and insights coming from the clinical practice. But none of this gives us the authority or the permission to access or share individual patient information. Patient records, medical histories, lab results, and anything that can identify a person are protected by strict privacy regulations. We are not allowed to handle, transfer, or use this type of information without proper approvals and documented consent. Even an unintentional comment shared in the wrong place during the wrong time can put a patient at risk and expose the company to legal and ethical consequences. This is why confidentiality is not negotiable. Protecting patient data is not just a compliance requirement. Actually, it's a core responsibility that safeguards trust in the entire healthcare ecosystem. When we maintain strict boundaries in this regard and respect privacy at every step, we protect patients, preserve credibility, and ensure that the medical decisions are always made ethically and responsibly. An interesting point is that this area is becoming more risky when we look at it with the technology that we have today in hand. So anyone can send an entire file of information via just a mobile text message. And imagine the risk of sending patient information, lab results, diagnosis by text message without being authorized to do that. So please, before assuming that this is an initiative to help a patient, ensure that you get the relevant approvals and consent, documented consent before doing so. And now we come to the third most common compliance matter that is encountered in medical affairs. It's the compassionate use programs, which is an area that really requires exceptional care and discipline. This program exists for one reason only: to provide access to an investigational medication when the patient has no approved treatment options. These programs are only driven by the unmet medical need, the ethics, and the regulatory oversight, not by business goals. And this is where a major risk appears. Interference from commercial teams or even the perception of commercial influence is a huge risk. When commercial functions step too close to compassionate use programs or compassionate use discussions, it creates a serious compliance concern. It can be easily seen as promoting an approved product or shaping access based on market potential or using patient need as a commercial tool. Even A casual internal discussion can unintentionally cross the line. The bottom line is that compassionate use cannot be commercialized. Not directly, not indirectly, not even by implication. The moment these programs appear tied to sales targets, market share, or launch planning, they lose the merits and the integrity. And it puts the company at regulatory risk. It damages the credibility with authorities, and most importantly, it undermines the trust that patients and healthcare professionals place in us. That is why compassionate use must remain purely medical and purely ethical. Clear separation from commercial teams is essential. Every request must be evaluated only based on the patient needs, scientific rationale, and compliance with the local framework. When we protect that boundary, we ensure that the compassionate use stays what it was meant to be: a humanitarian pathway for patients in critical need, free from any commercial influence. Ladies and gentlemen, a final recommendation from my side is to always check before assuming something is correct or something is doable. You always have your legal and compliance teams who are there for you and to help you. So that's it for it today. We started by defining compliance and the important role of medical affairs in this context, and we shared 3 most common reasons that we as medical affairs can make mistakes and how to avoid them. But at the end, frankly speaking, discussions about compliance in the pharmaceutical industry never ends. I will be very happy to receive your questions or comments, so please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you for your attention and see you next time.